Thank you, Deborah, for that. Now it's time for our first keynote speaker. Please join me in welcoming April Arzin to the stage. April Arzin is the Senior Vice President and Chief People Officer at Micron Technology, and she'll introduce our first speaker. She also serves as President of the Micron Foundation. Welcome, April, and thank you for introducing our opening speaker.
Thank you, and good morning. It is an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you today. You know, like so many others who shared this stage with us yesterday, the brilliant women who are up here, Sarah Draper, our next speaker, is an accomplished leader with incredible resilience, courage, and empathy. She is a trailblazer, breaking many glass ceilings, and as a former FBI agent for 20 years, she probably broke down a few doors as well. She served in the US military. Thank you for your service, Sarah. Following her graduation from West Point, she has a bachelor's degree in environmental science and a master's in organizational leadership from Gonzaga University. So impressive credentials on all fronts. But let me tell you what ChatGPT and LinkedIn will not tell you about Sarah Draper. As the CHRO of one of the world's largest semiconductor companies, Sarah, for me, is a coach when I need someone to hold up the mirror. That was never more necessary than during the pandemic. As you may know, the pandemic was not kind to CHROs. We were so busy taking care of our employees' families, the community, and none of us were taking care of ourselves. It was Sarah who held up the mirror for me. She reminded me that I needed to put on my oxygen mask and take care of myself, or I would be useless in my service to others. She is an incredible coach for coaches. When you need inspiration, when you need a new perspective, or when you just need a renewed spirit, Sarah is the person many of us go to. So with that, I would like to welcome to the stage Sarah Draper.
Yes, excellent. Good morning, April. Thank you so much. That was such a amazingly kind and generous introduction. I was so flattered that April was willing to do this introduction for me today. I know April is a dear friend, and she's part of my team of allies, right? So Angela talked about our team of allies yesterday, and April's absolutely in mine as a dear friend. In fact, I had no real idea how accomplished she was professionally until I wrote a grad school paper on her. I was taking a women in leadership class, and we had to interview an outstanding woman leader in our community. I'm like, I think April's pretty important. And so she was so kind to sit down. I was like blown away because her humility, her kindness, her compassion, her friendship, her love for everyone around her is just incredible. So thank you for sharing that today with me. And I do want to introduce a couple more people in my team of allies. Hanging out in the back there, Raleigh Vacek came in to join. She snuck away. She's another amazingly dear friend that's here to support today. She's an amazing community leader, woman businesswoman. She's going to hate me for this, but she's being recognized again tonight, the Idaho Business Review Women of the Year. She's a Circle of Excellence member. And I just get to surround myself with all these incredible people. And then my husband and one of my daughters are sitting here too to support me in this today. So thank you all. And as we continue on, Danielle and Emily, you guys are just amazing. Every volunteer who's been out here, every student who's here, every public servant we've got here, thank you. Man, it's incredible. This group, this energy, you all, I was reflecting on it last night, and I'm like, if only we could harness this somehow. I'm like, we are harnessing it. Because each one of you, as you're going to get to, is a point of light. Or think of yourself as a ripple of positivity that goes out. Every single one of us, as we extend out into our communities, get that opportunity to build the positive change we know needs to happen. So again, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and thank you all so much. What I'm going to talk about today is kind of my leadership tenets in the sense of a story, beginning with really early and going all the way through. And what I hope you take out of it, my goal and my challenge for you, is to find something in there that is helpful to you wherever you are in your own journey towards being well and leading well. Or maybe it's helpful for someone you lead or someone you love, right? We all are in this together. And what I've found is a little bit of my story. I've got 4 things I'm going to talk about: embracing the space, being a light, dilating my gaze, and showing up whole. And that's what I'm going to walk through here today. Okay, my name is Sarah Draper. I was born in Colorado. My dad was a graphic designer, and my mom was a teacher till my older sister was born. When we were 1, we moved to Michigan. My dad took a job doing advertising with a furniture company there. My mom wasn't back teaching yet, so we didn't have a lot of money, but my parents so highly valued education. Who are educators out here? Yes, thank you all. They so highly valued education. So they found the very best school district in our area and bought the tiniest little house so that we could go to those great schools. And I still marvel today, and my kids do when they visit, like how in the world, even after my little brother came along a couple years later, 5 of us survived with 1.5 bathrooms. Still don't know quite how that worked, but we made it work. Michigan is a beautiful place. Just like Idaho has our gorgeous mountains, Michigan has water everywhere. And this is how I grew up, being outside and around the water. Or maybe be on my bicycle. In the winters, we'd use like secondhand cross-country ski gear and ski in our local parks. The one splurge my parents had growing up was travel. And they would save all year. So every summer, we got to take a great road trip in the old family truckster. We would drive that station wagon all over the country. By the time I got out of high school, I'd been to 42 states. And in doing that, I fell in love with this tapestry that is America. We are diverse people, or diverse cultures, or diverse geography and terrain. So in the summer before 7th grade, when we were in Colorado visiting my dad's family again, we spent a day going down to the Air Force Academy, Colorado Springs. It came as no surprise probably to anyone that, yes, I fell in love with the Air Force Academy. And I saw this place as an opportunity to serve this country I'd grown so fond of through touching many corners of it through my Colorado roots. Now, at the time I wanted to be a marine biologist, no one had the heart to tell me that. I grew up in Michigan, right? No one had the heart to tell me that's probably not going to happen in the Air Force. So they still supported me. They supported me, and I remember coming back, and my dad took me to our local library, and we researched and mimeographed all these pages on how to apply to a service academy. And I kept that up all the way through high school. You know, I expanded that scope a little bit. Into high school, I decided to apply to all the service academies. But I was really focused on that goal, and I worked really hard on my grades. I worked really hard on SAT prep. I babysat for like $1 or $2 an hour all through Saturdays, all through high school to pay for Kaplan SAT prep courses. And somehow all this came together for this little kid from Michigan. So in the summer of 1991, about a month after I finished high school, with my new short haircut that had to be above the ears, I show up here at West Point. This is more formally known as the United States Military Academy. It is located about an hour north of New York City on the Hudson River. It's absolutely a beautiful place. It's the nation's first engineering college and the oldest continually occupied military installation. It's also a 4-year training program for future Army officers, along with our ROTC programs and our officer candidate schools. So I show up at West Point in the summer of 1991. I have no idea how I got there. I mean, you never really understand how you could end up in a place like this. In fact, my recruiting or liaison officer before I went, he said that people generally have 3 reactions to going. 1, they think they're crazy while they're there. 2, they would never do it again. And 3, they wouldn't change it for anything. Obviously, those are in succession, right? And all three still really hold true. The place is amazing, and I sometimes think I've only been successful as an adult because I somehow got into this place and was able to join what is called the Long Gray Line after I graduated. And you're walking around, and you're seeing statues like you see there. That's Washington's statue. This is a picture across the parade field, the plain, they call it. You see MacArthur and Patton and Eisenhower. And you're in now Grant Hall, when I was there, now Grant Statue. All these historical figures. At West Point, much of the history we teach was made by people we taught, they say. And all that makes you feel absolutely inadequate, right? I mean, that's a lot. I'm trying to take this in for this 18-year-old kid. And then you look around and you're surrounded by a bunch of other overachieving high schoolers. So you feel remarkably average, right? So here you are, like everyone makes a big deal, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of it, and you're like, what's happening here? One more thing made it really tough on me and caused me to put a lot of pressure on myself, is there weren't many women. In fact, when I started in 1991, we were only the 15th class, 1-5 class of women to be there. Now to an 18-year-old, 15 years sounded like a long time. That had been the majority of my life, and now I laugh. I wear clothes that are 15 years old. I mean, it's not all that long. To an institution that is near, at the time, now it's past that, was nearly 2 centuries old. We all know how slow change happens. Change happens slowly. And what I had to go through was nothing like those original trailblazers, that class of women in 1976, 1977, when they started. Still, it was tough. We all stood out, and people were very curious about our experiences. I'd be out walking around in my uniform, and it wasn't just fellow cadets or students. It was the public. People would stop me and say, "What's it like to be a female cadet at West Point? Is it harder than being a male cadet?" And I'd be like, "Oh, sir, I don't know. It's hard for anyone." But inside I was screaming, "Oh my God, this is so hard," because we stood out. We were only 10%. So if you take a school of 4,000 students, 10%, that's 400 female cadets, about this much of our room right here. Everyone knew us. And then I'm tall, so we have the sea of gray. So I stood out because of that. And then I had that crazy hair. I felt like everyone knew my name, and not in a good way. Ross, Ross, Ross. I didn't know the right greeting. I didn't do the right thing. I didn't cut the pie for dessert in 5 exactly perfect pieces, so I wasn't going to get to eat. So you get into what's called, and we know to be vicious cycles. Has anyone heard of a vicious cycle? Yeah, we're pretty familiar with them. We get in a negative place up here, and guess what? Or we do what we're thinking about. So something goes down, we go down. Our emotions go down and spiral. We can do no right. We're in those circumstances. And that's how I felt for a long time. Somehow I got my head up, and I started looking around and finding compassionate people wherever I went, helpers. And I have since then always vowed to be that compassionate person. The team leader who, instead of grilling me at morning formation every day on this somewhat useless memorization of the front page of the New York Times that we had to do every morning, he would come to a formation early and quiz me on my world history because I was really struggling. Or the upper class cadets, we couldn't have radios at the beginning. They did, and they couldn't have it loud during study hours, but they would play it just loud enough that if my roommate and I got down on the ground, we put our ear next to the outlet, we could hear some music coming through. That's compassion. They're doing what they can. And then I have to bring this up. Yesterday, I was out in the plaza during the reception in the bank, the credit union. Anyone grab some Andes Mints? Andes Mints. I think some days this was the only calories I got because my roommate, somehow something had gotten through the mail to her. Now I'm revealing all these secrets. Had gotten to the mail to her, and every night we would break an Andes Mint in half. These had come in, and we would share a story together. We'd each eat half a mint so that we would help each other through this experience. So not everything was bad, though. And you get through that first year, and all of a sudden you begin to realize, hey, this is kind of what I make of it. And I began to understand there were opportunities I'd have nowhere else. One was joining the crew team. I rowed crew. It was a club sport, which was awesome. No one had to be recruited. I was not a recruitable athlete, but I got to join this incredible sisterhood of women. And every day I also got to row away from West Point, which is a really nice thing. As I rowed backwards, it got smaller and smaller and smaller, right? That continued to grow. In fact, my senior year, a gentleman comes across the river. The Hudson River is this beautiful valley. He comes across the river. He's British. And still remember his name. And he says, hey, would you guys like any help with your crew team? I've got a little experience. He was being insanely modest. He was a very big deal in the rowing history, and he was a member of the oldest rowing club in the world. So spring break of that year, we got to go here, which is at the famed location of the Henley Royal Regatta on the Thames River, one of the most famous rowing events in the world. We didn't race in the race, but we just got to borrow some shells and row down that river and take some good pictures. But it was such an incredible experience. And I began to realize there's so much amazingness that was happening here. As April said, I didn't get to study marine biology. I did study environmental science. And Kevin and I were talking yesterday, and Boise State just launched an environmental science program this year, which is fantastic, right? So I got to study environmental science. I got to go to the Coast Guard Academy, so that's kind of cool for a semester. And get this, I studied beach erosion in the Outer Banks of North Carolina with a bunch of PhD surfing students out of Chapel Hill. So that was really fun. So all sorts of other things start happening. And this is when I began to realize things don't have to be perfect to be happy. Right now, positive psychologists talk about this all the time. We're beginning to recognize if we wait until something's right or good to be happy, we might feel a fleeting sense. I got that promotion, I got into that school, a fleeting feeling, but then it's gone because we keep pushing. Whereas if we embrace those positive emotions, joy, serenity, gratitude, peace, whatever your positive emotions are, our brains actually perform better. So we live longer, we have healthier relationships, we do better in life. And I began to see this, and guess what these are? Virtuous cycles. Just the opposite of that vicious cycle I was just talking about. So this experience was so valuable to me. I somehow made it through. And here I am at graduation. I did well enough that I got to pick what I was going to do in my career. I decided to choose military police corps. Combat arms was still close to women when I graduated. Military police was as close as we got. And I got to pick going to Germany. I mean, what 22-year-old college graduate's not going to want to go to Europe for 3 years? So pretty cool. But that's so interesting because now, I had no idea at the time that was going to be the beginning of a 28-year career in law enforcement. So I arrived in Germany. Shortly thereafter, we deployed to Croatia. Now, we were in Croatia, which had just ended their War of Independence a year prior. We were in Croatia, about 30 of us, living in an off-site hotel in my platoon as a platoon leader of these folks. We had attached, medics, mechanics, cooks, things like that lived with us. And we provided route security for troops going in and out of Bosnia. We were not the main effort. Bosnia was. We were supporting that main effort. But still, this was a lot of responsibility for a young, then 23-year-old. And so I found being with my soldiers was very valuable. Just being out there, patrolling, being out there day or night. I wasn't above any task. Didn't matter. I would go out there and be out there with them. And I now know this to be the idea of servant leadership. At the time, I just thought of it as helping. Right? So it seemed to work well enough for me. It was incredible to be able to participate and help another country through their turmoil. They had just finished their war, again, a year earlier. The fields weren't safe for anyone really to be out in, and these little kids would come over, this little guy and his friends would come over and play soccer, sometimes in a swimming pool, an empty, abandoned swimming pool. And soldiers would get out there and play with them occasionally. And that was 25 years ago. And I now wonder, what's happened with those kids? I do think we might have been a part of a positive future. Croatia is not a huge country, and just this last year, 25 years later, men's soccer team from there got bronze in the World Cup. I mean, it's not out of the, it wouldn't be extraordinary that maybe some of these kids were a part of that. So to be there to help others, so compassion, being a helper. I continued on with my career, had a great year in Korea, a couple other assignments, ended up as a company commander at Fort Lewis, Washington, of a military police company of a couple hundred soldiers. This is about a quarter of us. We were fielding a new vehicle, so we were up doing a night gunnery in Yakima, a night training maneuver thing. We deployed to Kosovo in October of 2001. October 2001. These rotations are planned years, sometimes years, certainly months in advance. We've been prepping for this for a long time. It was still very difficult for me and my soldiers to be leaving the US just 1 month after our own country had been attacked by terrorists to go help out another country. But that was our mission, and we do our mission. And we got over to Kosovo, and they were just as filled with gratitude and appreciation and support of the US than had we been in New York City. So people being able to be a part of something bigger than yourself, stepping out of your own personal ambitions or goals or pride and being able to help someone else is so incredibly rewarding. So I was enjoying my time in the Army. I had now, I'd taken those servant leadership concepts. I was adding tactical and technical proficiencies to that. And this was working pretty well. I thought, hey, I'm getting this thing about this Army leadership stuff, and I was really enjoying it. So about a year after we redeployed, I left the Army. My husband always laughs at this story because it's a long, ongoing joke with us. But I left the Army because I'd gotten married to this guy about 2 years earlier. And the Army and he joined the FBI. He left the Army and joined the FBI. And the Army and the FBI weren't working together at the time. So the FBI had assigned him. I was in Washington. They had assigned him to Oregon. And the Army's like, yeah, we can get you to California. I'm like, man, we've been apart 2/3 of our 2-year marriage already. That's probably not the best way to continue staying married. But I was super fortunate, though. I was able to trade one service for the next. And just about a year after that, here's this guy right here presenting my FBI credentials to me at my FBI graduation from the academy in Quantico, Virginia. This is a great way to continue to serve. And also being in the FBI over the course of my 20 years allowed us to continue to live many amazing places and work all our different program areas. It's a great opportunity if you take it to learn new things and then find ways to kind of stack or bring those things. So for all of you young folks out there, I think it's important to recognize with careers, there's not often like a just straight trajectory. You find things in different places and bring them together and you build your skills. So I worked a little bit of cyber supporting with some counterintelligence and counterterrorism. I did criminal work. And I covered all our major programs in the course of my career. So I'm just going to go through a few of those highlights here. Our first assignment was Oregon. I was assigned in Salem, Oregon. Rod was already up in Portland. And Salem is what we call resident agency. So the FBI has 56 field offices around the country, and many more than that, legal attaché offices around the world. But domestically, we've got 56 field offices. And each one of those then has satellite offices that we call resident agencies. So you're not where your flagpole is, just these remote locations. So I was in Salem, Oregon. And I know this is Haystack Rock. It's not technically Salem, but still. Oregon, right? Like my Michigan Beach picture. I will admit I didn't grow up on Mackinac Island. But this is, Oregon. We did cover 2 coastal counties, and it was great. But there were just 4 of us, and we covered 5 counties. So totally manageable for connections, liaison, relationship building. Not totally manageable for doing our day job. In fact, day 2 in this RA, I was out on a search warrant, and I had more local law enforcement partners than we had our own folks. And that's how it went my entire career. That's how it went the entire 3 years in Salem. Law enforcement partnerships in all our communities are critical to our successes. They're absolutely essential. And I learned that day 2 as an agent. There are 18,000 law enforcement agencies, 18,000 plus law enforcement agencies in the US. And they all operate independently, and that's state, local, tribal, federal, military, law enforcement agencies. We all support one another. Unlike the Department of Defense, right, where you have a command structure and a hierarchy, everyone operates independently. So those relationships I learned early on were critical for the rest of my career, and support and seeing the great work that happens up there. So spent a few years in Salem, then my husband got this amazing, he was selected for an amazing program. So 6 months pregnant with this little daughter, we headed off to Virginia. I was assigned to our Washington field office, and I was, again, one of these remote offices. Coming in, I'd done criminal work in Salem. We did everything from meth to bank robberies and violent crime type stuff. I got to Washington field office. They put me out in this kind of remote, if you will, resident agency in Manassas. And I was assigned to work healthcare fraud. Healthcare fraud is not what I thought I'd be working when I came in the FBI, right? And going to DC, I'm like, I'm going to work public corruption or counterintelligence. The Bureau had a different idea. They needed me to work healthcare fraud. I knew nothing about it. But actually, I ended up spending, by choice, 5 years doing it. Some of the most amazing work I've done, some of the most challenging work I've done. We did everything from drug diversion, the opioid crisis, all the way through anything that touched a health benefits program, up through pharmaceutical fraud and FDA misbranding and things like that. Very wide array of things. You make your happiness. Sometimes you don't pick where you are, you make your happiness. If you dig in, you're going to find something great in that. And then after 5 years of that, I'm like, I want to round myself out. I needed to get some additional skills because there were still things I wanted to experience in the Bureau. So I switched over to do a hybrid counterterrorism cyber program with terrorist activity online for a couple years. And then this guy here got us a golden ticket to any of those 56 field offices because he'd done such a great job in his job for 7 years. So we could go to any field office and negotiate for resident agencies. Sight unseen, we picked Boise, right? This is pre-2020 earthquake, right? So the fingernail is now off of the finger of fate, but she was with us. We were camping as families when I took this photo, right? So we picked Boise. We fell in love with it. Just for everyone online, if you don't live here, it's not that good. But everyone here knows how amazing this place is. We loved it. We had a great time. Initially was coordinating the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and then the FBI recognized that we needed some specific national security focus. We had 2 supervisors in this state when I got here. One was here in Boise, and one was up in Coeur d'Alene. And so they made another supervisory position specific for terrorism and national security, and I was that supervisor. So that was pretty cool to be able to build these programs. Interestingly, at least as far as I know, in memorable time, I was the first FBI woman supervisor here in this state. This is the first time in my career, once I came here, that I realized there are not a lot of women in law enforcement. It just hadn't been like something I'd seen before. And so here I am supervising now this terrorism squad. And I would be at a conference like this, and there'd be 5 women in there. So I guess that's good odds when you need to use the bathroom. They don't have to convert any like we've been doing here. But like we would know each other everyone would know us by first name again, right? And you can understand some of those performance pressures that come from that. In law enforcement in the US, there's only 12 to 13% of law enforcement officers are women. And when you get up to the chief level, it's 3. And we know that anything below 15%, I mean, give or take a couple percent, right? Anything below that, you get a lot of risk of stereotyping and performance pressures and things that come with those very low numbers. So I would just want to take a minute. I know we have women law enforcement here, and would you please stand up? Yes. Woo. Love it. So well represented. This is fantastic. So those are some interesting numbers. There's an initiative. There's a number of people who are agencies, organizations that are recognizing we need to correct this imbalance for a lot of reasons. One of the interesting things is it's a great career. But a lot of young women don't even consider it because you never see any role models. You never see yourself there. So we need to start spreading the word about what a great career is. We also bring so much to the profession. And so there's a recognition, we need to improve this. We need to start to write this. And one of these things is called the 30 by 30. And it aims to get 30% of new recruit classes in the agencies that are signing on, of those new recruit classes to be women by the year 2030. So yesterday, I think it was Cindy, right? You talked about 2030 and 7 years in tech disruption. In law enforcement, we're trying to get to 30%. 30% is not just because it sounds cool, right? 30 by 30. It's because it's not until that point that a group can begin to influence the culture of an organization, right? So we're trying to get up to 30%. And I'm super proud that the FBI recently signed on to this. Very proud. So we loved it here. Everything's great and wonderful. And then my husband and I looked at our calendar. We're like, oh no, our careers are winding down. And there's still some stuff we want to do. And those things aren't here in Boise. So we decided to apply for some positions back at the East Coast. We told our kids, oh, she just did the 2 thumbs down. They were devastated. Oh man, they asked for a lot of good stuff, like a dog, a boat, not leaving during the school year. None of them we came through. The one thing they asked is that if, when we could retire, if we could come back to Boise. So we said, if you guys still want to come back in 3.5 years, we'll find a way to come back. So we made it. All right, so here we go. We head off to Virginia. Get that last one up there. Back to Virginia, and I was just beyond blessed to be able to finish my career doing my most favorite thing I've ever done, and that ever in my life, and that's teaching at the FBI National Academy. Our National Academy is a 10-week residential program for law enforcement officers that come in from around the world. It's not where our new agents and analysts train. Those are also housed at our training division, but this is a specific, pretty prestigious program that folks apply and many wait many years to come to. And we say we take like the top 1 or 2% of law enforcement. There's only 4 cohorts, and each one has between 200 and 250 leaders who come in. And while they're with us, there's a lot of networking, of course, but it's mainly a collegiate program. And so they take graduate and undergraduate courses, and we instruct those and all sorts of topics. The University of Virginia is our accrediting body. So like I served as a UVA adjunct in that instructor capacity. And I was able to take my passion for leadership and my very strong passion for wellness and bring those together and eventually make an offering specifically for wellness for leaders and focus in on the specific stresses of law enforcement leaders. And it's so needed. We've got in American law enforcement and also with our international partners, about 10% of our students come from international agencies as well, all over the world. So we're seeing a really important thing happening, a transformation that's long overdue. And this is a focus on wellness, not just officer wellness, because we know our professional staff members go through the same things. Our dispatchers, our evidence handlers, whoever they are, but wellness for law enforcement. Trauma is real in law enforcement. In fact, the most recent, a good study we've seen is that it's 2015, so I think these numbers are just going to be higher. Your average U.S. law enforcement officer experiences 188 critical incidents in the course of their career. Those are traumas, every single one of them. And you can probably think for yourself, like what you've experienced. And those of you, maybe you work in a helping profession, you see those numbers too. But most of us sit way, way lower. One trauma is bad, 188, and all that adds up. So significant cumulative impacts of that, right? So there's a lot of effort that's happening to change this. And I am so grateful that we are starting to see a really positive change happening in many. 18,000 agencies is a lot to change, a lot of culture change to happen. But this is the conversation. The major conferences are about this. The discussions with our senior leaders in law enforcement, they're about officer wellness. It's very, very important. I encourage you all, and I tell you all this for those of you that are community members, I think it's important you recognize what these incredible public servants do for us to keep our lives safe, to keep our communities safe. I'm sure you though, they don't do it, they don't see it as a sacrifice. They don't do it for our thanks. Many of them view it as a calling. It's a profession that pulls you towards it. But I know they do appreciate your thanks. They'll never tell you that. But Monday was September 11th. Right on September 11th, we see all these wonderful things about first responder ceremonies and support for this in our military. And all great. That means a lot. And I think just knowing that every day is important. If you get the opportunity, please do consider just expressing that to them. All right, so that's it. 32 years, that's a lot, right? So whip through kind of, this is your life a little bit here. And doing this was really fun because it caused me to do a lot of reflection on what's really been important in my life. And I'm gonna go through a little bit about my tenets and how I've developed these and why they've been so important to me. I've been a work in progress my whole life, right? Every single one of you is. But we don't always realize it, right? And so that takes intention. Attention to what's happening, but intention. We have to do that deliberate work. I didn't begin doing that deliberate work until about 5 years ago. I was preparing to climb this mountain. This is Mount Adams in Washington. Has anyone been on it? Yeah, awesome, great. You guys did it. Some of you probably work it, right? So yes, it's not a really tough climb, is it? Like this guy did it in like half a day, you know. I was in a grad school program. We do it right. We do it in 3 days with a lot of learning building all the way around the way. So I had wanted to climb this mountain. I was in grad school. I was about halfway through my org leadership program, and this came up as an elective. And the immersion was climbing this, and I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. What the class was absolutely secondary to my interest in climbing this mountain. But just so I could say, I told you, I did it too. Not quite. I really wanted to do it. The class was organizational resilience. It changed my life. It absolutely changed my life, resilience. As I learned, starting at that moment all the way through till this morning, continue learning on this piece. I've never been short on grit, right? Never been short on persistence. In fact, anyone read the book Grit, Angela Duckworth? Yes? Some of you guys, there's an amazing book, right? Effort Counts Twice, amazing research. She's a positive psychologist at a University of Pennsylvania, researcher and author. She writes this book, Grit, and she's continued to do a lot of research into this space. Where'd she go to study for that book, to research? West Point. Right? So she goes and finds people like me who never quit, never give up, right? And that's what I thought resilience was, this like persistence, never give up, no matter what. I thought struggle was a sign of weakness. I felt a lot of struggle, but I thought admitting to struggle was a sign of weakness. Oh my goodness, I couldn't be more wrong. I began through this journey to learn about positive psychology and to learn about growth. I was introduced to many different people's works, and one that really is valuable to me is a description of resilience from the late Dr. Chris Peterson at a University of Michigan. And he described resilience as the ability to struggle well. Whew. All of a sudden, struggle is not a bad thing. It's not something to be ashamed of or afraid of. In fact, struggle is when we grow. We have to go through struggle to change and grow. And so I began to understand struggle is something to be celebrated. This opened me up to so much continued growth. One of the things I became aware of, and this has become my mantra, professional and personal, is my need to embrace this space. If you've not been introduced to the works of Dr. Viktor Frankl previously, he was a Holocaust survivor. He was imprisoned, I believe, in 4 concentration camps in about 3 years in World War II. He was an Austrian psychiatrist prior to the war, and he continued that work after. During those camps, he lost everyone dear to him. The one life that he didn't lose was his own. And so he came out of that experience, and in 1946, released Man's Search for Meaning. It was kind of his seminal work about his thoughts on surviving, what made people survive when you have something you work towards or a meaning. He released this for us. Our lives aren't nearly what he's been through in any scale, but he wrote this for us to better understand our own struggles. And I find so much meaning in this idea between a stimulus and a response. When something happens, and then the outcome of it, we have a choice in that space what we do. We might not realize it. We're all doers. You guys are all doers. Everyone's in here voluntarily. You're doers by nature, and we like to make things happen. Sometimes our best course of action reveals itself in waiting. Other times, we don't feel like we have space. Something's got to get done now, I assure you. You have time for a breath. How do I want to be in this moment? How do I want to engage? What do I want to do or say? Can I exhale? Make a little wedge, make that space a little bit bigger. So as I began to grow into this idea of space, it began to introduce me to what ultimately became my 3 leadership tenets that support this growth. But it all begins with this, embracing the space. Every day this runs through my head with every interaction. I don't know. We just moved back across the country. We don't know what's going to happen the next year. I'm going to embrace this space, or I'm going to make most of the time I have. So I support this with my 3 leadership tenets. One is, and they're also personal tenets, one is be a light. The second is dilate my gaze. And the third is show up whole. Being a light. Now, this might seem like a personality thing a little bit, and I do admit I was voted in my high school class most spirited. I was not voted most likely to join the Army or have a 28-year career in law enforcement, right? So it might seem like a personality thing. However, there have been many times in my life where I've hidden my light. I hid my light because I didn't want attention. I didn't want attention because if I made a mistake, then everyone's going to know because I've got attention, and all of a sudden, somehow magically, it's going to undo all the good that I or any of my other female colleagues had ever done. Right, so I hid this light down. Other times, I've had people suggest to me that my chosen professions, that I'm not right for them. I'm too kind or I'm too optimistic. And these get to you over time. You hear things like this. You begin to internalize it. When I was in the Army, I had a sergeant who once described herself as a jelly bean. And that stood with me. Soft, I've got a lot of candy themes in here, huh? Soft and crunchy on the outside and gooey on the inside. And I thought, man, don't all we women do this? At least it seemed to me like at the time we did. We put on this metaphorical armor to put on this stoic face to try to be just respected, seen as equals. At least that's how I felt at that time. And as we went on, it took a lot of work in later years for me to know, to believe, to know that my light is a part of my authenticity and that I am enough as I am. I am who I'm supposed to be. I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Turns out, humans are drawn to the light. It's called the heliotropic effect. Plants are too, right? Like these trees, they're looking towards the light. Humans are drawn to the light just the same. And once I started openly letting that light show, appropriately, right, letting that light show, I was amazed. It's as if I'd opened up space in others for them to let their own light show too, whatever that light is. Men and women, everyone. People would tell me, thank you for modeling this. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for giving people permission to truly be themselves. So this idea of authenticity is partly about being a light for me. It's also so many other things, many of which I've seen happen regularly in law enforcement. A light can de-escalate. A light gives us hope. A light can disarm. A light can help console people in the darkest times. I see those things a lot. Maybe you have spaces in your organizations or lives where you need lights to illuminate some things or remind you of what's important and valuable. So a light, that's a big part of it for me. The other thing that I like to emphasize is the light is a spark. That's why we're all here, right? We've got to spark and continue to spark in these ripples or lights, or choose your analogy, right? To change for the future. Law enforcement numbers haven't changed in about 20 years, and we've got some really ambitious goals for the next 7, but I believe it can happen. And I believe wherever you are, whatever you're doing, positive change can happen. But it's up to us to be those lights. So be a light. The next is dilate my gaze. I got this from a podcast I regularly listen to. And it's Dr. Andrew Huberman out of Stanford. He's an ophthalmologist and a neurologist. And in this podcast, he shares about occasionally looking out to calm your central nervous system, like relaxing your visual field. And you never looked out over a beach or a beautiful vista, you just kind of calm. So there's a thing happening with our eyes and our brain and our nervous system as well when that's going on. So he shared this idea in his podcast about occasionally dilating our gaze. And I reflected on it, and I'm like, well, when I heard this, I had a meditation practice by then for a number of years, and I'd experienced a similar impact through my meditation practices. But I was out biking one day, road biking, and I realized the same thing was happening when I was road biking. I was relaxing my gaze, I was letting my mind wander, and all of a sudden I was filled with all these creative ideas. So dilating my gaze became a bit of a metaphor for me and a whole lot of other things. Dilating my gaze got me out of my head. I was so worried for so long about what all my perceived imperfections and fears and vulnerabilities. I was so worried about ever, making waves, having any issues. I was holding back. And because I was holding back, I wasn't connecting well with others. Because when we hold back and we're in a conversation, that other person holds back. We know this. We notice this. You don't even have to say it. You know it, right? I had to learn to be confident in myself. And once I learned that, it opened up. And others, again, found that space to be confident in themselves. And it helped with my connections. It helped with my relationships. It helped them, again, know that they are enough. And we are all in this together, and we are all connected together. As a leader, I began to dilate my gaze through taking that balcony view of leadership. Rather than hyper-focusing on any one thing all the time, there are times for that, of course. No absolutes in any of this, but I needed to back up, see that whole, see that big picture, see the strengths everyone had come together in a new type of tapestry, right? You got to step back occasionally as a leader, dilate your gaze, see those big pictures. So that is why I dilate my gaze. My last one is showing up whole. I put a lot of work into a couple domains in my life, work and fitness. And my family sadly got what was left. Right, we were there, it was present. You gotta be present when you got two working parents trying to do the same career. But I wasn't engaged. And as I began to learn about mindfulness, what I began to learn is that when your mind and your actions meet, that is mindfulness. It's really the only way we fully commit to anything we're doing at that point, when your mind and your actions meet. Multitasking is a bit of a farce, right? And we have to do stuff sometimes, but if we really want to engage and commit to another or a project or a focus, we've got to figure out our own energies and how we get to that focus. Mind and actions meet. And it was amazing. Once I did this, what I realized is I didn't need to work fewer hours. I didn't have to have some time turner and get more hours in my day back, right? I didn't have to quit working out. I just had to be present in the moments I was in. So when a kid comes up and they need me, I've got a choice to make. And this is what meditation taught me. When you're trying to meditate, who has a practice of some sort? Who's tried and quit on day 2? Yeah, I can help you. Please do let me know. Because we all quit on day 2. I say it's like snowboarding. No one ever does it twice. so yeah, I wanted to quit too for like 3 months. But in meditation, you get constant distractions for your attention. That's awesome. That's our brains at work. They're keeping us alive. They're doing what they're supposed to. You begin to recognize them when I have a choice. I have a choice in this moment. What am I going to give my focus and attention to? What is most important in this moment? You begin to learn how to prioritize those things. And that's what I learned through meditation, but I took it outside of that into my daily life. What is most important in this moment? Being able to learn how to prioritize those moments. So building on meditation, mindfulness, positive psychology, resilience, post-traumatic growth, that is a really great thing for those unfamiliar with it. All these ideas, I educated myself a lot. I began to practice these, and people started to say, like, hey, you're different. Sarah, what's different about you? And people, Anna will laugh at this, people who didn't know me before started calling me Zen. I'm like, what? She heard it at my retirement ceremony. She's like, seriously? People like, there's something different about you. People started asking. And I would share with them what I had been doing in my own life. And then others found it valuable. So this is why I started to bring this together for law enforcement leaders in my class in the National Academy. It's important that we figure out how to be our best selves. And I couldn't do it without the support of these folks. This is my last bit here, showing up whole. My husband and I have made it a priority, our family a priority in our careers. I know it might not feel like that to the kids sometimes, but we're super proud of the responsible adults they're becoming. And everyone says we make it a priority, but I don't know how often we really do that. You know, it's pretty common in the professions I've been in for families to pay a price for a single parent's success. It's quite rare to have two folks doing the same job, just the nature of work and the hours and the unpredictability of the work. And so we've had to very deliberately focus our family efforts and energy on how to balance. And it's been a lot of negotiation. And I'm not talking about the like who's doing the daycare run and who's making dinner conversations and many weeks and months, probably years, right? That's all we got through. But it's these long-term career discussions. We both had things we wanted to do in our career, and we partnered together. Sometimes one would surge on the family side so the other could surge on the work side. These were deliberate decisions we made throughout our careers. Oftentimes, we just kind of stayed on par with each other and kept up with those negotiations. Regardless of whatever your family status is, I just want you to think about this. If you're in a relationship with another, a committed relationship with another, these are important conversations to have, and not just have once. Renegotiation is needed. Recalibration is needed throughout. We somehow got through 20 years doing this, with a bureau career doing this. It's important, regardless of your family status. Again, if you are in another relationship with, or a relationship with others, please just consider, how are we going to balance this? Because what happens is the day-to-day consumes you. And before you know it, your career has passed you by, and you risk being filled with regret, and even worse, resentment, about what you didn't do on the career or the family side. So it's an ongoing harmony or integration, right? There's not really balance to this, but it's an ongoing effort. We just went through it, and I will say, when you're done with your careers, you're going to have some good memories. You're going to have some good friendships. You'll probably have learned some important things. Maybe you'll have a 401k. Super lucky you're going to have a pension, right? When you walk out, that's the kiddo that walked out with me on my retirement ceremony. They're the ones to invest in now. So if you are in that he was waiting for the movers, and the other one had her friend's farewell. So if you are in another relationship or a relationship with someone else, just pay attention to that now. It's important. It's probably the most important thing we've done together is focusing on this. So showing up whole. Showing up most days is hard enough, right? Many days we're like, I'm here. I showed up. Awesome. I found, though, that when I put wholeness in there through all these things, it makes showing up a heck of a lot easier. So at this point, I'm going to break for questions now, and then I'm going to wrap up at the end. So we're going to do questions before I conclude. So thanks, Emily. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful. I want to remind the audience members that if you have a question, write it on a card at your table, hold it up. One of our wonderful volunteers in the blue shirts will scoot over and get it and run it up to me on the stage. But I've learned so much from you, so many neat terms and so many wonderful sort of superpowers that you described this morning. But I thought I might start with a question about the 30%. Yeah. Because that really struck me as an important piece of how collectively women can influence institutions and structures. So could you say a little bit more about why 30% and what the research is, or why that makes such a difference?
So, and I'm fuzzy on the specific sources of the research for sure, but understanding that it's not, and it's kind of like we start to quit noticing differences around that point. Right? And so the differences, April probably has got all this research like specific, because they have so many amazing DEI efforts at Micron too, but you quit notice, that's not the first thing you notice when a group is at around 30%, right? And that's when a group has the capability or the capacity to begin to influence a culture, right? We quit noticing what makes us different and we just start to move forward. Thanks. Yeah.
Wonderful. So there's an interesting question here from an audience member about shifting careers into law enforcement.
Yes.
Your trajectory was pretty clear, but are there paths or ways to get into law enforcement, middle-aged, educational opportunities, or those ways?
Yes, I love that. Right. So, yeah, there are absolutely. I would just say go talk with your local recruiters. We hire a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds. I say the more diverse, the better. I was telling some folks this last night. Like in the bureau, man, I love it when we hire teachers because teachers are so good with each other. They're so methodical. Not what you would expect to be your traditional background for law enforcement. Scientists are incredible with that organization and process they put into their investigations. So we look for absolutely diverse careers. Now, in the FBI and the agent side, we have, unless you're a military veteran, we have a 37 is an age cap, and it just has to do with the federal government mandatory retirement age of 57. We have to serve a 20-year career.
Wonderful, thank you. You are so humble. I heard West Point is the hardest military academy to get into and to complete. How did you mentally change through those hard experiences?
Oh, I love that question. I learned early on time management. I think that's a very specific thing, but you get really good at your scraps of time, right? But I also got good at prioritization. When I was there, you had to turn your lights out at midnight and couldn't be on before 5 a.m. But it's a tough, and I mean, I was taking 22 credit hours a semester. It's an engineering school. It's tough. You got all this other stuff you got to do too. The academics were absolutely the hardest part for me, really starting that sophomore year. You learn time management. You learn how to cut out the fluff. When you're limited to the number of hours a day, you just start to cut that fluff and learn that prioritization, what really is important and what truthfully isn't.
Good job on the questions. Wow. This is intimidating. You're keeping me on my toes here. So this is a great question from our virtual audience. I love that you refer to servant leadership. It's a model I continue to practice. Has there ever been a point or a level in your career where you discovered it hasn't served your goal?
Absolutely. That's a great question, right? There's no absolutes in any of this, and my grad degree is in organizational leadership, so we had to study all the different leadership philosophies and styles and theories and all that. My personal one I've gone to is authentic leadership. If you probably caught that. Servant leadership, like any other, so they have some over-application, and for some with servant leadership, it can be misconstrued as micromanagement, right? Depending upon the audience and their competency level and how much they want that engagement. So it's important you meet people where they are, right? And so you might have a junior person who really needs that. They know they got a partner and an ally and someone with them that's going to help them learn. And a senior accomplished person is like, yeah, I got this. I'll let you know if I need something. Just touch in, right? So it's important to have that full range of leadership competencies and capabilities there. But yeah, it's a great question. They all do have some potential over applications.
Excellent. A couple specific questions here. What does your meditation practice look like? What time of day, for how long? It's often a struggle to stay consistent with busy schedules and young children. How did you do it?
Oh, I love this question. So I made meditation a requirement for my law enforcement officers. So I've helped 350 stressed out leaders get through this. And it is so tough. I would say the principles are, for me, I have found you got to find something that works for you. 80% is good enough. So quickly I'll have them work through I use guided meditation. I use a specific app. I've used it for almost 6 years now. It works for me. No need to build on that. Time of day is, for me, it's often whenever I get it in, right? Some people in different meditations can have different applications. A morning practice might set you up for a better day. UC Santa Barbara did a mindfulness study, some of the work of mindfulness-based stress reduction. Students who were preparing for the GRE did a 2-week mindfulness-type meditation, and their GRE scores improved by 16%. So morning meditation can help set you up for that better day. An evening meditation can help you wind down and let go of some of those things from the day to prepare you to sleep. They have different purposes. In my perfect world, it's right before I start to do some deeper thinking or cognitive work. I need that for my focus. So I will do a meditation with a specific focus application to it or intention to it to help me with that. But I only do 10 to 15 minutes a day. It's like brushing your teeth, right? Once you build a habit, you just do it. You know you're better for it. You start noticing if you haven't done it in a few days. Well, I hope that's not like brushing your teeth. I noticed right away. Okay, it only goes so far. But
Wonderful. So it's difficult to recruit anyone
Yes.
into law enforcement these days. How have you been successful in recruiting women? And any advice for those of us that are trying?
yeah, who's the recruiters out here? Who's asking these things? You guys are trying to recruit, right? I think we need to continue to, and I talked with you all last night, we need to continue to expand our scope to people that have less than our expected backgrounds for the profession, and continue to build up why so much value added for looking at problems a little bit differently. I think that can help. I'm not the recruiting expert by no means, and we struggle with it too. Law enforcement is absolutely struggling with it right now. But the more we talk and share our stories, as women or as anyone in the profession who's had a great career, I think the more others see that as a place for them, right? And so I think those things can help.
This is a follow-up question on that. What can agencies do once they've recruited women to set a new culture and prepare the way for a work environment where women want to stay and be retained past the initial recruitment stage?
Oh, I love this. Find your allies. Find your allies. I mean, as Angela talked about, her team of allies. Right, but find your allies within the organization to support. And I'm totally going to embarrass my husband here, but he is fully on board with this. And I'm going to tell you some of the things he's done as a male in a male-dominated profession to support these things. He was responsible for a body armor program at one point for SWAT teams. And he said, do you have women? We're measuring for new body armor. Can I share this stuff? Like, hey, do you have women measuring too? People hadn't thought of that. So your male allies need to do these things. He would go out to actively recruit women in field office when he'd do visits. Hey, consider doing this. So we need to get whoever, we're talking women and men, but if there's a diversity difference, whoever those power holders are, have incredible power on their folks. So for him to be out there saying, he's a senior leader of one of our our highest performing tactical programs in the world. And he's out there saying, women bring a lot to the table and we need more. So if we can get our allies to that too, if we can talk with each other, lift each other up, make opportunities and open things up for one another and support one another. I've never been in a career where women have been negative towards each other, but I've heard about those and it breaks my heart. We are all doing the best we can every day. Right? And so we got to give and receive grace for one another and lift each other up and make sure we're set up for success. Success for one should mean that we open up those opportunities and champion people, right? Champion people and advocate for them and their ideas as much as we can. Become those echo chambers for one another's. So I think those are a few things.
Yes, thank you. And this one is related too from some of our law enforcement officers in the Park Service. We've been having a conversation about officer wellness, and female law enforcement officers deal with specific trauma related to harassment, toxicity, gaslighting from our male peers, as well as incidents. Have you done any studies on this? Do you have any information that can help with that aspect?
I do not have specific on women in law enforcement with those specific concerns, but I knew from an occupational wellness standpoint in toxic work environments, right, that's something that's real, that's out there. I don't think it's just limited to my professions. And so we've got to find better ways to organizationally train leaders and train members in those organizations to be aware of those things. But unfortunately, I'm not aware of studies specific. I think that sounds like a great PhD program. Anyone? Or thesis
I'd
or
supervise
something.
that. Come on
Yes.
over.
Partnership. Oh
Absolutely.
my gosh, can I just share that? This is one of the super important things I would love to see happening more online, because you guys are probably in different places. Please, law enforcement, consider partnering with your local universities for research. What better way to build up your communities and to have these engagements with one another? It's so incredibly powerful when local police departments getting their research done by the local university or another big partner agency. Super important. So thank you.
I wish I could ask the 27,000 other questions that I'm
know.
holding right here, but I wanted to give you a chance to say the final words
thank
here,
you so
Sarah.
much.
Thank you.
Emily. So what we want to do here is just, continue to be a light, right? For me, that means lifting and supporting one another up, champion, advocating, whatever that means to you. Find your way to be a light. Dilate your gaze. Step back. Take in the whole big picture. See how these beautiful things, these different parts come together. You're going to have to fine-tune, of course, but step back. Look at this as a whole. Your own life and your place in the life of those you lead and those you love. And show up whole. Wholeness is many things for all of us. We burn ourselves out when we put all our eggs in one basket, right? And so if we can build up these practices to help us be resilient before something happens, this idea of presilience, doing the stuff so we can recover better, relying upon one another. That's the last thing about resilience is it's not just us. Resilience is actually our relationships with one another. Our species has evolved to need each other in a crisis. It's not a nice to have. When everything's good, we're fine on our own ruggedness. We have crises, we need one another. So we need to build up those relationships too. And embrace your space. Whatever your space is, know that there's always space. There's a breath. Something could be years long. There's space. Sometimes we need to create space for ourselves. But only when we step into that gap with intention is that choice truly ours. So I encourage you, take care of yourselves. You've got to be well to lead well. And when you lead well, those that you lead and those you love can then thrive. So thank you very much. If you guys want to reach me, I'll be around all day. I don't know if that QR code works or not, but no, it does work. I don't know if it'll work on your phones. You're welcome. Please do let me know how I can help you. So thank you all so much.
Please join me in welcoming Sarah. Thank you.